Welcome back to Real Conversations with Johnnie Finch. Today I have Coach B. Harden. She's a lawyer, first generation law student. She got into school with a less than desirable LSAT score, but got into a top 10 law school, had a less than desirable GMAT score, got into a top 10 business school. She has this wonderful, excellent service where she helps first generation law students get into school. She coaches them, she builds them up spiritually, she helps them academically as well. She's just a motivational person. I love being around her. She's just a special, special, special individual. Real Conversations. Let's go. Welcome to Real Conversations with Johnnie Finch. I am here with Coach B. Harden. I am so excited to have her here today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Now, guys, I always give a little segue before we get started, but this show is very, very, very important because at the end of the day, at the very end of the day, in which Coach Harden is going to tell you, it revolves around your future and your money more than anything else. As a first generation law student, I had a lot of people that were around me, a lot of people that were praying for me that I could, get to law school, get through law school, pass the bar, start practicing. But I didn't have any resources besides one of my really, really good friends. And he didn't know any lawyers at the time either. So we're going and we're studying for the law school exam called the LSAT, which Coach Harden will tell you more about. And we're studying for it, trying to figure out which books we need, which workshops we need to take. We're spending money on resources that we didn't have at the time. I had a state job and it was good for me at the time, but I didn't have, $200-300 to be spending on LSAT books that were not giving me the score that I needed. So consequently, I ended up taking about a year and a half before I actually got into law school. And that's obviously time that, that was God's timing in the fact that that's when I got there and that's how it worked out. But if I were able to score higher on the LSAT when I first started, I would have got more money going into school. I would have been able to demand more money, which Coach Harden will tell you more about. I was on Instagram one random night, and I had been following Coach Harden for a while, and she was doing one of her free seminars that she does on her Instagram, and she was just talking about the benefits of being prepared and having a coach through the LSAT process and through the registration process. And I just started, really start streaming with tears because I didn't have that. 13, 14 years ago. Had it, things could be a lot different for me right now. I was able to get a little money going into school, but, we're talking about thousands upon thousands of dollars in scholarship money when you are not applying, or you don't know how to apply to the right school, or you don't know how to take the LSAT, or you're doing it, which I did it pretty much trial and error. So I'm so glad that she's here today. Thank you, Coach Harden. Could you please speak to my audience a little bit about yourself?
Of course. So I am honored to be here. It's, Attorney Finch and I, we directly connected. He mentioned that he sat in on one of my Instagram lives one evening, but I remember us connecting because it was during this, the whole COVID-19 situation, and people are, on social media a little more, or a lot more than they usually are. And Attorney Finch just kind of jumped in on one of my lives and was just giving me such amazing energy and was like, guys, like, speaking as someone who did not have those resources, speaking, from the perspective of someone who had to kind of struggle and was frustrated and was overwhelmed and was disappointed along their law school application journey, like, you need to listen to Coach B. Harden. Like, she is giving you the real deal. Like, if I had her when I was going through my legal journey, like, I wouldn't have had the bumps and the bruises and the obstacles, right, and the challenges that obviously Attorney Finch successfully overcame. But like, it came with a little bit of heartache, headache, and hassle, right?
Oh yeah.
And so that's kind of my position as well. As when I went to law school, or when I applied to law school over 10 years ago, there was barely a Facebook, right? There wasn't Twitter. IG wasn't a thing, right? IG didn't become a thing until 2010 or so. And so here I was applying to law school with just a wing and a prayer, right? As someone once said, I had air and ambition, right? And not much else, and through the grace of God, I was able to, navigate, the process, but I too had bumps and bruises right along the way. I did not have a strong, people always talk about a strong LSAT, and that's the law school admissions test. And I'm going to take a pause there because one of the things I think Attorney Finch and I will agree with is in the 10 plus years since we both graduated from law school, there have been some major landscape changes in the law school application world. So now that we're in this kind of COVID-19 world, the LSAT, which is this law school administrative or law school application test, it used to be the only standardized test that you could take to get into law school. Now, because of COVID-19, some law schools are allowing students to take the GRE, the graduation record examination. The GRE is also a standardized test, but it's really for kind of graduate programs, maybe for an MBA or a Master's of Arts, a non-legal program. But because of this COVID-19 state, you do see some law schools allowing students to basically substitute the GRE for the LSAT. Okay. Now, some students have chosen to go the way of the GRE because the GRE only tests two things, your quantitative skills and your verbal skills, right? Whereas the LSAT, you've got those three sections. You've got logic games, which everybody hates, right? Attorney Finch, everybody hates logic games, right? Boo for the logic games. You've got logic games, you've got reading comprehension and analytical reasoning or logical reasoning, right? And those are very challenging kinds of material for anyone to tackle, but especially for first generation law school applicants like myself and like Attorney Finch. And so some law schools are trying to open up the application vein to allow the GRE to be a substitute standardized test. And then just a few weeks ago, Arizona State University College of Law, which is a top-ranked law school, usually ranks around 24, 25, 26 in the nation. They just said, you know what? We're not even worrying about the GRE or the LSAT. You can come here on a conditional admit basis. Yes. So they basically allow for you to be admitted into what's called the Masters of Legal Studies Honors Program, which is about a year-long program. And if you're in the top portion of your class, you then can convert over into the law school, into the JD program. And if you don't make it into the top portion, then you just remain in the Masters of Legal Studies Honors Program. But I think it is really a very innovative way to get students into the law school application pipeline without having the LSAT or the GRE as kind of that standardized test barrier. And for many of us, standardized tests do really present a barrier to entry because I am someone, right, the same way I'm putting my hand up in the air too, right, church fingers, because I did not, if you, and maybe Attorney Finch, you feel the same way, if I were to be judged as a lawyer, right, 10 years out of the game, if I were to be judged as a lawyer based on my LSAT score, I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't, right? Because my LSAT score did not fully reflect, I don't think any standardized test that I've taken, but definitely not the LSAT, fully reflects my academic potential, my intellectual rigor, right? My capacity. Most standardized tests for many of us don't fully reflect the fact that we're going to dig in and do the work, right? Yes. And so that's the difficulty when you place so much weight on the LSAT. And I think kind of routing back to why I wanted to start this law school coaching business is because I know when I was applying to law school, everyone talked about the LSAT, right? If you don't do well on the LSAT, it is going to basically, cast your application. It's going to be the death knell of your application. And what I can tell you is I'm a living witness. I am testimony that just isn't true. I did not have a strong LSAT, but I still got admitted into a top 10 law school. I was admitted into Northwestern, what's now called Northwestern Pritzker University School of Law, and got a $75,000 scholarship, a low LSAT score. So I am living proof that law schools, right, and that's what I work with students to do, is really help them align with the law schools that are in their best interest and apply to those schools, is figuring out what makes you you. I call it your unique applicant proposition, And Attorney Finch, we all have it, right? As first generation people, we all have it. We got an Uncle Junebug, we got an Aunt Peaches, we got a something that makes us a little different, right? Mama and them, daddy and them, somebody, right? That has poured into us that makes us a little different from every other applicant. And what I help students to do is really tap into that, right? And really find that unique applicant proposition, know how to position, right, and present that in a way that is palpable, because you have to know how to present that in a way that's palpable so that it is received properly by the law school application committee, right, the law school admissions committee. And that's kind of why I started my law school coaching businesses, because I felt, probably like you, Attorney Finch, you know, those bumps and bruises and the heartache and the hassle and being frustrated and trying to Google everything. And back then they didn't have Reddit or, like I said, you know, Twitter or Instagram. But I am, you know, back then there was a lack of information. And what I have found now is that there is almost over information, right? There's an over index of information in the law school application space. And so it can be difficult for students to discern which voice to listen to. And so what I have found students have found very attractive about me, and why students, you know, kind of align and find me to be a good fit for them, is they see and hear themselves in my story. They hear and see themselves in the frustration that I once felt. And they see that there was someone who was like them where they are, and that that person, have kind of crossed over to the other side. And so it's like visual politics. And I'm sure it's the same with you, Attorney Finch. When people see it, they can believe it, right? And so that was kind of the goal behind me being the Crimson Law Coach, is to help students. You know, my mission, as I like to say, is to help first generation, what I call legal eagles. Those are people like you and I who are the first in our families to become lawyers, right? Or first in our families to be future lawyers. Help students successfully navigate their law school journeys. And that's what it is, so that you can hopefully get a scholarship, get admitted into your dream law school, or just navigate that process with more confidence and competence.
Yeah. You know, as I listen to you speak, and I could just do it all day long. Number one is because, I mean, you always speak my heart. You always speak my heart every time I see you. I have several issues, or several glaring issues that I always gets back to me being a first generation law school law student. And when I think about it and I listen to you talk, I'm always just like, you know what? Those three things that plague me the most, how can I make sure that the next generation of lawyers don't have to worry about that? Because if they don't have to worry about it, they can focus on the actual practice of law rather than having, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, or, you know, going to the wrong place. When I tell you that my whole process in selecting a law school was so uneducated, now even thinking about, because even asking attorneys that are not coaches. So if a young person were to come to me before I met you and say, hey, you know, I'm taking the LSAT right now, I couldn't tell them anything. Number one, I wasn't that good at it when I took it. But number two, okay, so we're talking about 12, 13, 14 years ago. What in the world can I offer you? From back then, I could barely remember the bar, and I try to forget that. So even the people who mean well at this particular point in time, but you have a guardian angels who's sitting right there beside those LSAT books, and your legal education that's ready to take you in, take your hand and say, hey, these are the things. Like, okay, so Arizona State is not taking an LSAT right now. That information, where else would you get it from unless somebody was sitting at the gate?
Right.
Someone who looks like you, who knows your heart, understands the troubles, and you're always coming with new information every time I find you every single week. It's so great. Tell me, could you tell everybody a little bit about what exactly you do?
Yes. So I work with students, to primarily first generation students, to really amplify their law school application. So I'm like you, I'm very candid that I am not an LSAT guru, right? That was not my strength as evidenced in my low LSAT score. But what I do is I do give tips and tricks and tools. There is a young lady that I have, that I often refer students to. Her name is Deb, and she has a company called LSAT Made Easy. Another fellow woman of color, and really her her area of expertise, her zone of genius, is helping students master the LSAT, particularly first generation and diverse students. So if you are just LSAT focused and you think that that's all you need help with, I highly recommend LSAT Made Easy. I help, and if you listen to any of my lives, I know you have, but for those of you guys out there, if you listen to any of my lives, I talk about the hardware and the software of your law school application. The LSAT or the GRE, but predominantly the LSAT is the hardware of your application, right? That's the hardware. That's the mathematical stuff, if you will, the quant stuff, right? The analytical reasoning, right? The software of your application is everything else. It is the strategy. It is whom do you ask for your letters of recommendation. It is when do you apply. It is your personal statement. Some of the deliverables, if you will, that I work with students to really perfect and refine are their personal statements, their diversity statements, their resumes, their addenda, right? And knowing how to make those things fit together. Oftentimes students who have previously applied unsuccessfully come to me and they're like, oh my God, Coach B, like, I want to work with you. I've been watching you, like, you know, kind of look over my stuff, my application materials, my components, and give me your thoughts. And oftentimes you can see, and this is usually what happens, Johnny, is or Attorney Finch, what will happen is students will start their law school application journey, let's say January of this year, and they'll write their personal statement. Then life gets in the way, and then something else happens, and they come back to writing a diversity statement, maybe in May, June, July, August, right? But they don't go back to what they reference. They don't reference what they wrote back in January. So now you've got two disparate pieces of application materials. They're talking about two completely separate things. And then you want to use your resume, and you're like, well, the resume that I'm using is the same resume that I used to apply to my job with, so it must be good, right? I got my job with it, ergo, right? It must be a good resume. And then they don't even submit an addendum, right? And so you got these three different pieces of components, right? Your personal statement is talking about A, B, and C. Your diversity statement is talking about X, Y, Z. Your resume hasn't been updated because it's the same resume that you used for your job that you've been on, right? And so you don't have any connectivity, right? You don't have any comprehensive narrative that you're telling through your application, through the software of your application. And that's really what I help students fine tune is, like I said, that strategy, that application strategy to figure out what law schools to apply to, when, and how to craft your application to fit those particular goals.
Coach Harden, if you don't mind, could you use a secret hypothetical person and just walk us through maybe a fake scenario or a fake problem somebody has, and exactly how you kind of get them from point A to point B? Because I think there's a trick here. I think you are actually helping people grow. That's what I think. When I listen to you talk, when I listen to you speak, and you say you help people find what's unique about them, right? Now, I did go to law school a little later in life. I was around 29, 30 years old when I went. So at that particular point in time, I was a little settled in, and I always said that law school would have ate me alive. Law practice would have. I don't know whether I would have gotten through, but law practice would have definitely ate me alive if I had went a lot younger, because at that particular point in time, I had no life experience. But you're saying that you are showing people what makes them special, what makes them diverse, where their strengths are. I think you're actually kind of pulling something out of them that they're going to be able to use in law school law practice. So I see what you're doing, my friend. You're empowering people, and you're just not telling them.
I like that, because you're right. I mean, part of it is, when you are, so many times, Attorney Finch, I think you would agree, you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. Right? And we often assume as first generation people, because we are taught, don't be braggadocious, don't brag on yourself, don't talk about yourself too much. Just, you may want to dim your light a little bit, right? So others feel comfortable around you, right? We are used to hearing that narrative. And so there are things that are innate to us, that are native to us, that are amazing, that are wonderful, that are just dope and interesting. But we are so used to not talking about ourselves. We don't want to beat ourselves, our chests, right? We don't want to be seen as standing out from the crowd. And so oftentimes it's like through the coaching, I'm like pulling that string, right? I'm trying to unravel those layers. I'm zooming in like, you know, a movie with kind of panning into certain things to figure out like, who are you, right? Like if there are 200 students applying and there are 20 seats available, why should one of those seats go to you? It can't just be because you want to become a lawyer, because all 200 folks want to become a lawyer, right? Like you're applying to law school, ergo you probably want to go, you know, you probably want to be a lawyer, right? So why do you just like, what is it about you that is compelling, that is interesting, that is different, that is dope? And the thing is, we all have that.
Yeah.
You just have to know how to talk about it. So you're right. There is some empowerment that kind of goes into this because students have to look at themselves. I often talk about it when I do VIP days with students. I call it my kind of Ayanna Van Zant moments, right? Where we're getting deep, right? We're kind of peeling back those layers and we're really talking about what makes you, you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So yeah, if you could tell me about maybe about Mr. Billy Jenkins or somebody, you know, someone who comes to you with the issue and how you kind of in real life kind of, you know, navigated him in the right way.
So what often happens, Attorney Finch, is Billy Jenkins will be someone who has known since he was 5 or 6 years old that he wants to be a lawyer, right? Everyone in his life has told him that he should become a lawyer because he likes to argue, right? And that has been implanted into his spirit for forever. And so what inevitably is going to happen is Billy Jenkins will take the LSAT and he won't have studied. He will be just kind of trying to figure out what the LSAT is about, right? He doesn't have any strategy. He doesn't have any plan. And inevitably, he is displeased with his score. So then Billy Jenkins decides, well, you know what? I'm going to take the LSAT again. But now we're deeper into the application cycle, right? So now you've wasted another 2 or 3 months trying to study for the LSAT a second time. And all the while, Billy Jenkins doesn't have a personal statement, a diversity statement, a resume, or an addendum. He's only been thinking about the LSAT. Well, now the LSAT has taken up 4, 5, 6 months of his application cycle. Well, then Billy Jenkins waits until he gets his second LSAT score. So you're now even deeper into the application cycle. You're probably up, you know, into the top or middle portion of the new year. And now Billy Jenkins just now starts to think about his personal statement. He doesn't have a diversity statement. He's using the same resume that he had for his job, and he doesn't have an addendum. He hasn't given his recommenders quality time to craft a really competitive letter for him. And then he'll just shoot the application out into the air to these random law schools. And he'll wonder why he didn't get the result that he wanted, which is being admitted into law school.
Yes, yes.
Right? And, you know, if time isn't that big of a deal for you, if you've got 3 or 4 years and you're like, I just want to, you know, keep trying my hand at it. Absolutely, I understand. But I was like you, Attorney Finch. I didn't have time, right? No. Like I went to school later in my 20s. I didn't have time to dilly-dally. I had to be intentional, right? And one of the things that I always share with on my lives is, you know, my mother, neither of my parents are attorneys, hence me being first generation. And, you know, they were like, baby, you know, we've gotten you through undergrad. If you're going to do this law school thing, you're going to have to figure it out on your own. You know, like we will support you, right? But like, they were like, look, our bandwidth has been extended. Like it is, we don't have any more bandwidth. We can't tell you how to cross the bridge from law school applicant to law school, you know, attendee and law school graduate. We can't tell you the things that you're going to confront. We got you to and through, you know, undergrad. But beyond that, you're going to have to find a mentor, a book, a blog. Well, they didn't say blog because they didn't know what a blog was back then. But, you know, they're like, you're going to have to find some kind of resource because that is beyond our capacity. We don't know anything about law school. We don't even know any attorneys. So we can't guide you. Right? We will support you and love you from afar and do everything we can. But you're going to have to find a way to figure this out on your own. And so one of the things that I always share with my legal eagles is, guys, we are so used to struggling on our own, right? Because we are the first. So we're used to having to be resourceful. And there's nothing wrong with being resourceful. Right? Like being resourceful is how we got to be who we are, Attorney Finch, right? You got to know when to move and bob and weave and right, duck and dodge, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But you do that when there aren't any resources, when you truly have to figure out your way on your own. But when you do have those resources, or when those resources are available, it is wise it behooves you to avail yourself of those, right? So it doesn't have to be so hard all of the time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And if you don't mind, go ahead and give everybody your Instagram handle. And what I want you guys to do is, after she gives you the handle, press pause, go over to Instagram, and start scrolling up and down. And I want you to see all of the wisdom that she's putting out 24/7 every day. And we're going to go ahead and get back into the end where you can press pause. But go ahead and let them know how they can find you on Instagram and on your social medias.
Thank you. So on social media, it is Crimson Law Coach, all one word, at Crimson, the color, Crimson Law Coach. And what I want you guys to do when you go over to my Instagram is be sure to join my free Facebook group. I've got a free Facebook group called the Law School Society. And they are basically like my beta testers, right? Like they are my foot soldiers whenever I'm having a zany idea to go live at midnight, like I've done before, where I have like a whole presentation worked up and I'm dropping some gems. I go in there and ask those guys like, hey guys, I'm thinking of going live tonight. Like, what do you think, right? So if you want to be a part of a group that really kind of informs the kind of content and trainings and tools that I offer to students, you definitely want to be in the Law School Society. And again, it's a free group. The link is in the bio. I am welcoming members. Be sure to answer all 3 questions though, because that's one of the things. Sometimes students request membership, but they don't answer all 3 questions. And it's really important as a future lawyer that you begin to understand, right, the rules of the law, right, the rules of the road. If you are given a directive to do something by the court, right, or by an attorney, like you want to be sure that you're being compliant, right, and observe that. So it's really important to me that the students answer all 3 questions. Because one of those questions is about being civil and being respectful, right? And Lord knows, you know, we want to ensure that I want to make sure, and I think Attorney Finch does too, that I'm creating a safe space for, right, future lawyers to really express themselves. And so answering that question, that 3rd question, is really, really important to me. So do that, and also grab my freebie. The link is also in my Instagram bio. It is a glossary of the top 10 pre-law admissions terms, because Attorney Finch and I can both attest that lawyers love to have special words for things because we like to do the most. And so the law school application process has its own vernacular. It has its own lexicon. And so you want to be able to be conversant in that and know kind of what these terms mean. So there's a freebie there for you guys. It's a glossary. Once you grab it, hopefully it will give you some value, but it'll definitely teach you about some of the top 10 terms that you will hear in the pre-law space.
Gotcha. And of course, I remember we're on YouTube, so by the time you guys see this on real time, you'll be able to look right down there and hit the little link. Hit the little link. You know, the funny thing and the strangest thing about my whole law school experience, and I mean, each place is its own little spot, but it kind of leaves you. You know, you develop a skill for the LSAT. And then you go to law school and you say, you know, nothing about that LSAT had anything to do with law school. And then you go to your classes and then you go and you take the bar. And even though law school, you learn the law, and then on the bar exam, you're taking a test about the law, they seem dissimilar in the fact that you go through your bar prep and then you actually go practice law. So it always seems like you're studying for these things and you're leaving it behind. So if you're doing that early, and I'm telling you that's what you're going to have to do, go ahead and get used to it.
Right.
All this young lady, so she can help you save time.
That's
it's
right.
all about time. If I'm sitting here for 6 months to get a terrible LSAT score,
right,
when I can sit here for 2 months doing it the right way. I did it in law school as well. But I mean, law school is a little bit different because you kind of have to get help in a different way according to whatever ethics rules. But when I'm sitting here and I'm telling you that this lady can put you on the fast track with her wealth of knowledge, she's nice, she knows your story, like, take advantage of it. And this is the next thing I'm going to say. Listen, Coach B's here. She has a lot of services that she's offered. But when you call her, make sure that you already have some money saved up. Because you got to invest in yourself. You know, she's giving you a lot of freebies, but if you want to invest in yourself, just like you're investing in Kaplan or Whatever those bar preps are, when you call her, you need to go ahead and have some money together so that she can help you. And eventually, she's going to put you in a better place to make more money. Mm-hmm. If you have more scholarship money, for whatever her fee is, I'm sure it's not as much as what a full ride is or a 50% ride is. And we're talking about $25,000, $50,000, $75,000 full rides. And when you get out of college, you get out of the law school, regardless of what's going on, Sally Mae is going to come the next day and say, hey, what kind of payment do you want to make?
That's right.
So when you talk to her, pay her fee, whatever it is, get yourself in a good situation to get you a great scholarship. Try your best to keep that scholarship, because these are the things, again, that's going to stop you from being so pressed about taking cases. Perhaps let's just fast forward. Let's say that I'm an attorney and I have so much law school debt. Mm-hmm. And I'm also trying to, I have kids, I have a family. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to make sure that law school debt is down, but at the same time, I'm trying to progress. Maybe it's a certain area of law that I want to practice, I want to focus, I want to specialize, but maybe I'm not doing that because I feel like I need to take, more cases than, as many cases that come in the door. What does that add to? That adds to stress and anxiety, which I talk to you guys about a lot. And yes, there's a certain amount of stress and anxiety that comes with law school, law practice, preparing for all of that. Do you sometimes do coaching as well as about the anxiety that comes around with?
Yeah, I think you will agree. There is a lot of anxiety with. I find students have a lot of anxiety about the LSAT, right? Because there's so much. It dominates so much of the conversation, and it's a test, right? And there is such a thing as test anxiety that can affect your performance. And I think one of the biggest things that I like to talk about really is mindset, because that's what this is about, Attorney Finch, is your mindset, right? And students so often think, oh, the reason I didn't get into law school is because I had a low LSAT, and I didn't perform well on the LSAT because I have anxiety, right? And everything is always attributed to the LSAT, and it's like, well, it's probably several things, right? You applied late in the application cycle. You took the LSAT 6 or 7 times, right? Because the first few times you were just kind of kicking the tires, figuring out what this LSAT thing was about, right? And then you studied for a few times on your own with marginal, results, and then finally you decided to get right, because that's how the narrative goes, right? So you applied late in the application cycle. You had a marginal, right? You took the LSAT 5 or 6 times. You had a low, right, LSAT score, unfavorable LSAT score. You didn't have a personal statement that had been looked over, that had typos, that had grammatical errors. You then had a resume. You didn't have a diversity statement. You then had a resume that hadn't been looked over. It was 3 or 4 pages long, right? And it was something that you used to apply to a job with. And then you don't even submit an addendum. And then you apply to schools that aren't even kind of in line or in sync with what it is you really want to do. Right. But you're like, oh, well, I was told I should apply to this law school, so I did. And so it's oftentimes a combination of those things. Right. And so kind of going back to the mindset is, but students will automatically assume it's because of the LSAT. It's LSAT, LSAT, LSAT. And I'm like, no, we have to do like a mindset shift to law schools just don't want rote robots, right? They don't want mathematicians only, right? If they did, it wouldn't be law school. They want people who are going to think, people who will analyze. And yes, arguably, that's why, people or law schools love the LSAT, is because it teaches you or it tests your ability to think or analyze. I disagree with that, but that's the rationale behind the LSAT. But the idea is that they want people who are going to think, right? And so if you put so much emphasis on the LSAT, and what I tell students is, if you put as much energy into the rest of your application as you do to the LSAT, you would see a better yield, right? Because you just mentioned studying for 6 months for the LSAT, but then students will take 2 weeks to do their personal statement, diversity statement, resume, and addendum, if that.
Yeah, if that.
And then they don't have a strategy, right? No one has looked over their application materials. They wait to the last minute to ask their recommenders for letters. But you spent 6 months studying for the LSAT, and then you get a marginal result. But what'll happen inevitably is that student Billy Jenkins will say, "Oh, it was because of the LSAT, Coach B." And I'm like, no, it's like compound interest in the area of finance, right? It's time, right? It's time compounds its interest, right? Mm-hmm. It's all of these factors that compound to give you the result, which is the unfavorable result. So going back to the idea of mindset, I have found that mindset is immensely, immensely important because it helps students ground themselves, and it also helps take some of the pressure away once they realize, like, oh, I can do this. Like, Coach B has shown me, like, I actually can do this. And I'll give you an example really quickly, and I don't want to deter from your questions, but I had a student that I worked with lightly. She and I really connected after she had applied to law school. She was preparing for interviews. And she was preparing for an interview at Harvard Law and at my alma mater at Northwestern. Now, this student had taken the LSAT. The first time she scored in the 96th percentile.
Okay. Yeah.
She was not satisfied. Went back and took it again and scored in the 99th percentile. Essentially a perfect score.
Yeah. Yeah.
With a perfect score, she applies to Harvard and applies to Northwestern, preps for the interview, and don't you know that she didn't get admitted into either law school? Exactly. Now, I never saw her personal statement, her diversity statement, her resume, her addendum. I didn't see her packet. I don't know what her law school strategy was. I don't know who her recommenders were. Again, I only worked to help prep her for the interviews.
Sure.
But what I can tell you is, as someone who did not have a 96, much less a 99th percentile LSAT score, and got admitted into Northwestern, and got a $75,000 scholarship, I can tell you that's the power of having a strong packet. That's the power of having good software, because it's not always about good hardware. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And I think, I guess after all of these years, I mean, when you look at, and I know we do it all the time, your best lawyers, you know, we don't ask about what the LSAT score was, right? Do we? But if we had to take a poll, probably not, right? Because it's those skills, there's those unique, diverse skills that you were talking about that makes you a great lawyer. And I appreciate you so much for bringing that to my audience, because I say it all the time, but maybe now that you're saying it, maybe now that you're saying it, Coach B, someone will definitely grasp and hear it. Coach B, I really appreciate having you here today. I want everybody to make in the comments, ask Coach B to come back again, and maybe she'll give us some updates maybe in the fall on what's going on as we enter into this it's May 2020 and we're dealing with the pandemic and everything that's going on. Maybe some cool new rules, freebies, but you guys, you have to follow her. You have to get on her Instagram Live. Sometimes she's there at midnight and she's just pouring her heart out as if she doesn't already have her law degree and already practicing law. She is literally begging you guys to do better for yourselves, which ultimately is going to save you money. Coach B, you're just so motivational. I just ask you to take, 30 to 45 seconds or 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and just, could you just speak a little life into Northeastern North Carolina, and then we'll be done for the day. Oh, yeah. I mean, I can appreciate, first of all, you guys are in the hands of an amazing, growing legal giant, right? Attorney Finch, I didn't even know that he was an attorney until we started conversing on Instagram, and he was just so honest and so earnest in his support, never looking for anything in return. Just like, sister, I see you. I see what you're trying to do. And I know that, like, as someone who went through the process, like, I see the value and the importance and the benefit of what you're doing, because I didn't have that when I went through. And I think you and I might have done like a quick little live a month or two back. And it was so well received because students, they appreciate, law school aspirants and lawyer aspirants, they appreciate seeing the journey, right? The glow up, as the kids would call it, right? They appreciate knowing that there were people who were once sitting in their shoes, standing in their shoes, and that we have crossed that bridge, right? That my mom talked about, that she couldn't help me quite cross, but she was going to support me all the way, but she didn't have the bandwidth, right? Attorney Finch, when we're in law school, when we were in law school and they were talking about res ipsa loquitur and, right, the rule of perpetuities. My mama doesn't know anything about that, right? Y'all can Google that if you want to, right? But like that is beyond kind of, and this is no slight, right? We all love our families. We love them for the love that they have given us, for who they have raised us to be.
But it was very wise of my mother to say, look, you're going to have to learn how to figure this out on your own, or go outside and find some resources that can give you the knowledge and the skill set and the resources that we don't have the bandwidth to give you. Right. And I think that really taught me very early on, like, okay, like there are certain things like I'm going to have to figure, like if I really want to be a lawyer, I'm going to have to figure this out on my own. And so while it was a wonderful lesson, it was a hard lesson, but a good lesson. It's one of the things that I'm trying to kind of help curve that learning curve for a lot of my future lawyers, by our future legal equals, is we don't have to continue to scrimp and scratch and figure things out on our own when there are resources. It's one thing when you don't know that there are resources or there aren't any resources. But once you know about them, right, it really kind of behooves you to help shorten that learning curve, because Lord knows, and Attorney Finch can attest, the learning curve of the law is long, right? It is a long, long curve, right? And so if you can start shortening that, right, and kind of saving your bandwidth for other things that will come along, it really can behoove you. And like I said, or like Attorney Finch said, once you graduate, Sally Mae gives you about 2 or 3 months, and she comes knocking at your door. And so when I have students, like I had a student just this year, a single mom of a young son, and she got admitted into her dream law school, a school down south, and she got I think it was $43,000 or $44,000 in scholarships. And that is a game changer for a single mom, for anyone who's applying. But especially for her as a single mom, that is the difference between her being able to become a lawyer, to go to law school, and not go, right? And so that's off. And she didn't have this super amazing LSAT score, but that is the power of harnessing that software that we talked about.
Yes, ma'am. Real Conversations with Johnnie Finch. Thank you so much, Coach B. Harden. Thank you.
Thank you.
Like and subscribe. We're out.